Mark Anderson, the co-founder of Netscape, defined product market fit as being in a good market with a good product that can satisfy that market.
So you want to have a market that shows a lot more potential. So that potential needs to be there in order that you can even build a company that is able to grow into that market.
So it actually means hitting the bullseye with your product, but that's really difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. And I think where there's also a lot of unknowns, and you just want to have a system where you can check, is this something that we can put more weight on? Is this something that is going to develop in something that can bear fruit?
Tim, hey, welcome to our show.
Hey Sven, happy to be here on the roadmap.
You are joining us from Switzerland, or?
Yeah, that's my main seat in Switzerland, but right now I'm in Lisbon to enjoy the sun a little bit because in Zurich it's only rainy, so I thought I'd just move over a little bit into the sun.
Jump to the coast a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
In warmer weather. Before we start, I'm going to ask you right off the bat. I saw that in your bio that you started in the gaming industry. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if you can call it industry, but yes. So during my studies, where we always had tasks, but we could choose on how to solve them. And I was more conceptually strong and I love gaming. So at some point I taught myself programming and then I started developing games. And that was also one of my first jobs for an agency where we developed games, where we developed different apps, and maybe even I was one of the first people to develop virtual reality applications and augmented reality applications. But it was pretty hard back then, especially with no further development background. But it was pretty fun, to be honest.
Right, and then you moved a little bit on to Frontify, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, there was one step between that. So I joined an e-commerce scale-up before, but then mostly one of the next bigger steps was being Frontify. So I moved away from the gaming and app development because I wanted to know, okay, how do people use the stuff that I built, right? And that's when I went into UX position next. And within that UX position, I then moved towards testing and A/B testing. That was so then optimizing the digital channels and stuff, and A/B testing on the website and on our marketing channels. And then I wanted to know, okay, testing on the website is nice, but testing on the business has much bigger impact. So then I moved to Frontify into the growth team there. And that was quite a ride because I joined as number 40, something around that. And then we scaled it up until 240. And now it's even bigger, but I just left at 240, 250 something employees. And I was in the growth team there. I saw a lot of different positions. I moved from just the growth team and working on the onboarding into marketing operations later, doing stuff on the website and for the digital channels. So that was a big learning opportunity for me to be in such a company that moves from being a family to being a machine, essentially.
Yeah, so did you get your interest there for startups, or was it a bit later?
I'd say it started with probably the scale up because I've seen how much people work together and how fast people can move, or the company moves, and I'm somebody that is bored quite quickly maybe. And then I really enjoy these dynamic environments, and once you get comfortable, you know that you should change something again, or that there's room for more optimization and potential to grow. And that's ultimately then where I thought I'm at home. After Frontify, I also built a growth team at AXA, which is a corporate environment. But there I just realized that for me, the speed is too slow. I can't work and deliver as slowly, or maybe that was just my problem. But I just needed my energy to go somewhere. And then after that, 2.5 years ago, I joined Peakora, and that's where we help startups to grow. And that's, I'd say, we help startups. So that's the one perspective. And then the other perspective is that we are ourselves a startup. But we have the advantage that like every one of us has been working in a high growth startup like Frontify or also like Beekeeper. We're working with people from Dropbox, from Tinder and Blinkist. So it's all experts. And what we wanted to do is like, hey, back then in the days, we didn't really know, okay, what are the pitfalls of scaling, right? What is going to be ahead? It was more like, oh, we just start somewhere and then we develop and then let's see where it goes. So what kind of, if problems come up, then we solve them. And ultimately, the goal of Peakora is that we really help startups to not make these mistakes, because a lot of startups fail because they do a certain amount of mistakes. Like maybe that's product market fit that we're going to talk about later. Maybe it's something else that they don't have something set up in a way where when they scale, it doesn't become a huge issue. And so, yeah, that's what we did. We call it startup enablement. And basically, we want really proven processes to scale up your company, your different domains, your teams, and then delivered by experts that really have done it before, that know how to implement that stuff, and that can also look into the future and really with some confidence say that this setup is going to hold on for a while and you're not going to have a little problems with it. And you're going to focus on scaling instead of putting out fires all of the time.
Yeah, it's pretty much startups are always challenged with many things, and they don't know how to handle some things. I know that, before we started recording, we commented that, a lot of them don't know how to do, product market fit, or let's say marketing, or, how to organize sales, or many other things. It can be confusing to them, what should we focus on first or later. Now that, you already mentioned product market fit, we're going to talk about that today, about Peakora's framework program, step by step, how to achieve product market fit, how to make things easier, for companies, just to build that product, get it out on the market, and start earning money. All right. So when I did my research, I was quite curious, where did product market fit, term came out from. And I found that, it was coined by Mark Anderson, the guy who co-founded Netscape. And it says product market fit is defined as being in a good market with a product that can satisfy that market. So it actually means hitting the bullseye with your product. But that's really difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. And I think where there's also a lot of unknowns, you need a system to kind of negotiate these risks and also be able to say with as much confidence as you can, like there's never a guarantee, obviously, but you want to be sure before you put a lot of time and money into an idea or into the next project. So this is really true at any stage, because your product market fit at the start especially is very important, but then also later it might change as you approach new customers, as you deliver new features, you bring new value. And you just want to have a system where you can check, is this something that we can put like more weight on? Is this something that is going to develop in something that can bear fruit and not maybe just a nice to have? And it's really stupid to realize that your product is a nice to have and nobody really needs it, but there was some traction maybe because of that or that thing. Or maybe you had a PR campaign, or you went viral somewhere, or you had a good investor with a lot of network, and that kind of got you over the first few years. But then to see, okay, my fuel is running out, we don't really solve a value, so it's really hard to sell what we do. And now we need to kind of see where that goes with already having hired maybe 50 people or maybe even more. Like I've seen cases where then huge layoffs really need to happen because it's just getting too hard because the foundation is just not there. Like the value of your product is not easy to sell, and it's not enough to basically hold that company that you already have built around it.
So product market fit is something with multiple variables. It's not a single thing that you should look out for. Yeah. Okay. When I was doing my research, I came up across a lot of advice that are quite, general, they don't, regarding product market fit, they don't really, tell you exactly what you should be looking out for. So we can start, with number one step, step number one at your program, which is market identification.
Yeah, sure. So let's say you have like an idea or what you want to do, and then you kind of firstly want to check, okay, what is this market that I'm going to sell into? Let's make an example. We have a very specific niche product. Maybe that's, oh man, now I need to invent something. Maybe that's like a special lamp to read at night, but your partner doesn't make up, right? Because it only shines on you. Stupid example, whatever. And so let's say there is a certain amount of people that would be interested in that, right? Because maybe it's mostly this and that demographic that reads at night, but most of them already have Kindles. And so you do some research and you look into that market and say, okay, potentially how many people would be interested? How many people could I address with my idea that would be interested in buying that? And if that number already gets super small, and that also then depends on how much you're going to sell for, right? So let's say I have a $10 product and 100 people, very extreme, 100 people would be interested in it, right? Then it doesn't really make sense to develop that product, right? Because in the end, the market is just it's holding you back. It's a ceiling above you that would be really hard to kind of break through. And that is a concept that now with my stupid B2C direct to customer example, but it's also true within B2C. Let's say you have a very specific software that helps just the biggest of companies, right? Maybe in finance. And when you look at the market, then the people that would be really interested in that or that would get the most value out of your idea are maybe only 20 companies. And then maybe you have a deal size in that enterprise segment of like 100,000 for your product. And then that's 100,000 times 10 or whatever I said. So that's like 1 million that you could make a year, right? Maybe even recurring. And maybe that's exactly what you want, but probably it's more expensive to build the whole product and to kind of build up the sales team and selling to them to get to these 1 million. So it's not really worth doing that. So you want to have a market that shows a lot more potential and where also your market size, that's usually investors look for like 10 million or upwards of like product you can sell or revenue you could get out of it, right? So that potential needs to be there in order that you can even build a company that is able to grow into that market.
Right. I mean, with the first step, things can get a little bit easier. You can find out what you're doing, what you want to do actually, and you can identify somehow your buyer persona, which is going to help you make a more informed decision, and just help you place yourself better in the market, against the competitors, if there are any, and there are always. It's really rare, that you discover a market that doesn't exist. All right, yeah. That leads us to identifying unserved needs. A lot of people don't realize they exist. If they did, everybody would be millionaires. And I can think of, let's say it was Slack. Slack started as an internal tool just for messaging, and it turned out to be something completely different. One of the biggest messaging tools that companies use today. So what about what's identifying user unserved needs about?
Yeah. So that's when you want to make sure that whatever the problem is that you want to solve, then we want to see, is that really a problem? And to make that connection to the market identification, because I think you said a very nice thing. It's like it can change and it can give you new insights. And that's true. Like when you see, oh, this market is actually, it's too small. Then you can say, okay, there are some other markets that we could develop into, right? And that is where I think it's important to mention that we look at this fairly straightforward, but there's always like some wiggle room and things you can adjust, right? but it's important to realize that. And then maybe after we found the market, we have our idea, and then if that is consciously or unsubconsciously or subconsciously, we have hypotheses about what these people need and what they want. So let's say we are in a B2B market. Let's take the enterprise example again, but it's really true for everything. Then we also want to know, okay, what company specifically in that market would be interesting to me, and who would I sell to within that market, or like who would be the user of that product. And here you have these hypotheses that I said. Maybe they're explicit, maybe they're implicit, but you want to list them and really see, okay, I have this, let's say, financial product, and I'm going to assume that people need this because, let's make an example. So I have a financial product that does workflows to know your customer. Right? So I'm going to assume that people that I've chosen in the market have a problem doing that, or that it's too slow for them to do that. So they need a solution that is faster, or that they are even interested in rebuilding this get to know your customer like workflow. And these are usually very basic hypotheses that we built a lot of like things around. Like we want to build our company on that, right? So we want to check if that's actually true. And so it's important to then go ahead and list all of these. It can be just a brainstorming together with everyone that is involved. Maybe that's only you. And then you say, okay, what are the basic foundations, the assumptions that I'm basing my idea around? And then once we have a list of these things, we can say, okay, how do we validate this? Like, how do we know that this thing that I'm assuming is actually true? And that can be done in all sorts of things. Maybe I had a lot of people in a former job tell me that this sucks. Maybe you had the problem for that specifically. Maybe there is some other data in terms of research where you say, okay, this kind of hints at that my hypothesis is actually true. And then you can go ahead and all of the people that we already defined that we want to sell to, we can start finding them on LinkedIn, on some databases. Maybe I know some out of my personal network, and I can do an interview with them, and I can say, like jobs to be done, for example, would be one that you can do quite nicely here. They would say, hey, this and that thing that you want to achieve, like you want to get to know your customer. Maybe you, how do you do that right now? And what are some issues with your current solution? And then you can kind of carve out what they're doing now and how they solve their problem now, and if there's room for whatever you want to do. And that way you can see, okay, this thing that I'm thinking of, these hypotheses, are they real? Can I confirm that? Or are some of them maybe not real? Like maybe they're not a problem. It was a false assumption. In reality, it's not. It's okay. And then at the end, you have a list of, okay, I have these hypotheses that are actually true, and I have these hypotheses that I prove to be not true. As in interviews, we recommend doing as many until to a point where you don't hear new things. That's usually around like 6 to 8. And that might be already a good connection to your first beta customers or people that kind of you have a relationship with them and you can maybe like ask them more things, right? And then once you have done that and you have a list of hypotheses that are true, you can start, okay, what would be potential like solutions that would help this? So yeah, it takes a lot of time for me to set up the get to know your customer workflows, and I need to change them every week, maybe. And that's a huge pain in the ass, and it kind of takes one day a week to do that, right? And then what would be a potential solution for that? Then you have other hypotheses, and then you also brainstorm potential solutions for that. And at the end of that, you have real problems with potential solutions that we can start testing with.
Right. And then, I mean, you can actually find out, that one thing wasn't a problem. There was another thing that was a problem. And then you can,
Exactly.
let's say, and then you can, tweak your idea or hypothesis a little bit, a little bit better, and maybe find another market niche that you didn't even realize you were going to find. So interviews are quite interesting because you can find a lot of things that, as you mentioned, that you assumed you were right about, but turned out to be completely wrong. All right. The next step is defining the value proposition. Value proposition is a concise statement, let's say in one sentence, that just defines what your product is about.
Yeah, exactly. So basically what we did now is like a qualitative validation so far, right, of our problems and what we could do about it. And in these interviews, like you nicely said, like maybe we even discover new things. And in the next step, we see, okay, this potential solution that I could build, what would that be, right? Is it for all of the hypotheses, but maybe there's like one big one that everyone kind of had a problem with, and so you want to start with that core. Like you don't need to build a product where every hypothesis that you confirmed is solved with, right? That can be also on a roadmap that goes over in the next few years. But what's the core of that? Or what can you combine in a way that makes sense? And then we want to see, and we already have that data from the interviews now. It's like, what was the value of them? We said maybe there's like a process that you want to optimize, and it's a pain to do that right now. So we are going to save people time doing that. And maybe it's also going to be easier than the solution that they had before. Like these are the classic USPs, right? So we want to say, okay, well, like the value proposition I can give to these people compared to what they're working with now. And then that is basically the messaging foundation for the next step, which is the quantitative testing. So we talk to people, we see that there's a problem, we know what their problems are, or we think we know, and now we want to get it in front of more eyeballs to really check, okay, is this something that also on scale people would be interested? Because probably you know from user testings that people don't always tell the truth, and sometimes they say something is a problem, but then they don't. This is a really famous example of like some company testing speakers, so like music players, and everyone in the interview said, oh, the yellow one is the best one. And then after the interview, people could choose what they're going to take home, and everyone took the black one, right? And that is an example of people sometimes tell you things that are in reality not true, or maybe not true is maybe exaggerated, but it's not such a pain for them as it might have seemed. Maybe they want to be nice to you, and so they say things that they mean differently. So
don't be honest, because that's gonna help me.
yeah, exactly. But maybe they like, I'm not saying they do that intentionally, right? But it's always good to really confirm, like, okay, how does this problem look at in scale? Like, are people interested enough into that problem that I discovered to really solve it for them? And then once you have that value proposition, you can go into this quantitative testing and basically reach out to your target personas. So that might be, depending on the product and what the personas are, you might launch an MVP with a landing page, and you have paid ads going through that, and you try to get like email addresses and see how many people would sign up. Maybe that's an outbound email, maybe that's something else, like depending on where you find your target personas, that varies. But the idea is we want to basically sell it to people and see, okay, would they sign up? Would they give the email address maybe in a first step to solve that problem? Is it worth it for them to do that?
Right. Now that, we mentioned again questions, it's really important, to structure the interview in a way that you don't lead the interviewee to a wrong direction, with your set of questions, because you can really affect their opinion. That's right. Yeah. All right. Now that we have our value proposition, we can start focusing on launching an MVP, developing an MVP, minimal viable product, which is the first step, to, let's say, our real product, which helps us, just to define things even further.
Yeah. And that's probably where you or maybe some of the more product wise people, they were gonna have an issue with me because I say like if you test an MVP, you should, as long as you can, drag out to actually code something or like invest in a developer or do anything like that. The reason being is we want to see if the house sells before we're actually going to build it, right? And that's why I said the quantitative testing is really, really important, because we want to kind of paint this picture. And I mean, we don't need to lie to people, right? We can say, hey, this is something that's coming up. Look at, like, leave your email to know more once we launch. I'm not saying we need to lie to people and say this is there. I'm saying we need to kind of paint a picture of what we want to do, and then already again test, okay, how much interest is there? Like how many people would buy this or would be interested in that? And once we have enough data on that, maybe we already have an email list, we have a lot of interest, maybe the first few people, I don't know, visit me at home because they really need this. Then once we have a really good idea on that traction, then we can start building the first prototypes. And then depending on your idea, it kind of depends on what that prototype is going to be. If it's going to be a click prototype, if that's going to be really something that needs to be developed, if it's a first version of like whatever, right? And that's also, I think, where you're quite comfortable with. But the main idea is we want to always justify before we put a lot of effort into something. And then once we've done that, we again want to justify and kind of test the first click prototype or get people in. And if they say, wow, this is amazing, this would make my life so much easier, then we're going to start build the next thing, right? And this is then the iterative process where we say, okay, this is something that we are super confident in, that we can make a business out of this. And that is an information that is really, really crucial before we really start like scaling stuff or like even think about hiring the first people, because hiring people might be cool and it might like visualize this progress that you're making. But if you need to let them go because you like there's a mistake, right, then that's going to feel shit, right? And also with the current market downturn, we've seen that companies struggle the most, where the product market fit is really something that is like in question, right? If there's value, people are going to stick with it, even though they might have issues. But if you're nice to have, then you're probably one of the first to be cut out of the budget.
I'm gonna jump back again to the interview part. No. To the interview step, because let's say, all right, I'm gonna use an example. Let's say we're building a fitness app, and you interviewed me, and I said, well, I'd like to have this feature and this and this, and then we make an MVP, have the first users, and it turns out that they don't like the certain feature that I like. So that's that's the importance of launching an MVP. Again, finding out some things that are going to help you launch that final product. You also mentioned for a little bit just improving an MVP, and that's the step number 5.
Yeah, exactly. And that's maybe a pretty good example, because then we maybe see, okay, like these features, they don't really like hit a nerve here. But maybe something else does. That could be a good learning. Or, I mean, in this process, always a valid option is that we see, hey, like our main value proposition that we thought. So maybe we are a fitness app for a specific type of people, right? Just because the fitness market is super saturated, so you need a niche to kind of start in. So maybe even like the main value proposition that we have set out to do for like very specific people, helping them get more fit, is that holding true still, or are we having an issue with that? Because it's always the most important thing to validate like your main core business. And if the problem is with the features, or like with how you did the MVP, or how it's going to look, or how it feels, then that's always different from, okay, our core value proposition is not accepted. Because then we need to go back to the drawing board all over again and really need to work on, okay, what kind of went wrong? Did we misunderstand people in the interview? Maybe it's the case, and we thought within the interviews there's going to be a good value for them, but in reality, maybe the pain is not as big. Maybe we thought maybe we exaggerated it, and it's not as big as we thought, and we can't really build a business on it, or we don't know how. And then you need to evaluate, okay, is that something, are we going to proceed with this? Are we going to change it in some significant way that has the best chances to then deliver that value? Or is it just the features or how it looks or how it feels? And we just need to work on that. But the main value proposition, that one is good. And we really help people and they love that, but they just don't like how we do certain things. So I think it's really important that you then evaluate based on really what is the core business? Is that right? If yes, then that's a huge win already. Because if you have qualitatively and then quantitatively proven your idea, then that's a huge thing. Like you found a business, right? And that's then what we mean with like improving. Okay, how are we going to go into the next steps? Is it the core business? Is it the features? What is the feedback? How can we work with that?
I've heard that quite often some startups skip the whole MVP part. They're, let's say, overconfident in their idea.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes like you have certain businesses or ideas or technical ideas where you really need a lot of ramp up time, right? So maybe like this one thing you want to build, I mean, it takes maybe at least a year to kind of fully bring in the value. And then that's hard. Maybe you can get like some investment the easier way, because you've done a lot of market research and you have a lot of data that indicate that this effort that you want to take and the money that you want to spend is actually worth doing. And maybe even it just takes another step back to see what is the core value of this, and can we evaluate in a different way, except for me locking myself into my room for a straight year and starting coding, or spending a lot of other money onto that. Because I mean, you don't really want to get investment that early, because then you give your shares or a lot of your shares for like not the most money maybe. So it's always worth it to evaluate, okay, is there maybe a step in between this big vision that I have so that I can really evaluate
Can you think of any examples or anything, from your personal experience where you're working on an MVP and let's say you found out that the feature is completely, useless or something like that?
Yeah. Yeah, of course we did. We also had that with
Plenty of them.
To be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like if you follow this process of always, like, even if you're bigger, like you have a proven like business, but then you maybe want to try, like, let's say you're B2B and you want to try B2B. Sorry, what did I say? Let's say you're B2C and you want to try a B2B product, and it's different SaaS, but there's a different value. Everything is different. You still can test this at this stage, right? You can say, okay, what is the market here? Who do I want to check in with? What can we build? It's the same process here. And if you do it right, then you don't really invest too much effort or time into something that is failing, because you see that before it happens or before you put too much resources or risk into that. And yes, I can't like say any details, but we also with companies, like we have seen, okay, there's a huge issue in selling that product and getting customers to also retain themselves, where we then said, okay, like there's a huge product market fit issue. Like if you start scaling, these problems are not going to go away. They're going to get worse. We need to go back to the drawing board. And like I said before, in the current market situation, these were the companies that had the most struggles, and also a lot of them had layoffs or needed to close. So this is really something that is not to be taken like too lightly in terms of like risk that you're going to assume.
Do you think was it possible for some of the companies, if they were, let's say, thinking much earlier, and found another market niche, that those layouts wouldn't happen?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, also like to be clear. Like sometimes things just happen and you can't really do anything against that, right? And then it's just just a shit situation. And you need to make do some layoffs, right? But in companies that have product market fit, you see that everything just runs easier. Like the sales process is easy because it's a real value that you provide. So you don't need to lie to people. It's real. People see it, right? Because you've built it that way. It's really valuable. And that also makes it easy for marketing, for sales. That makes it easier also for your customer success team or customer support team, because customers are happy, you retain them longer, their lifetime value gets bigger, they won't churn, and that's just like it's an overall win-win situation. Now I'm not sure if I answered your question or not.
I think we're in a cycle where just there was let's say a bubble, and now things have changed, but they're gonna go they're gonna get better. It's something that happens because I started reading last year. Microsoft is laying off people, Google, Spotify, and those are big companies, that I think pretty seasoned players that have been through more than one, such cycles, such as Google and Microsoft, so they're pretty much experienced. All right, so we went through 5 steps. Step number 6 is pricing structure, and I was always, curious about that. How do you find, the reference, to price your product? Let's say it's a SaaS product, and if it's something, if it's something new that's really, really rare, but you usually can find some sort of reference. But I was always curious, I would probably be puzzled, what should I charge my product? How should who should what plan should I offer? So how do you solve that one?
Yeah. So this is also going to be testing, but we do have a few pointers. Like in the market identification, right? We already have the market, the ICPs, the personas that we want to sell to, and that already gives us like a rough idea about what kind of like MRR or deal sizes or average purchase values are we looking here at. So, for example, if your target are maybe families, then they already spend like a lot of money on maybe their kids, on housing. They're not as, and that's a marketing term, right? They're not as financially liquid as maybe things are. So double income, no kids, so couples that don't have kids, right? And that already gives you another information about, what is a rough price point that these people would be willing to pay. But then at the other end is what the value is that you provide. If it's a very small value, it's probably on the lower end of what the people would be willing to pay. And if it's like on a bigger, then they pay more. Equally in B2B, like the more, like, are we saving people literally time? So that is money. Like if they have 1 day more a week, then that's a lot of money for them. And so that already gives us an idea about, what is the impact that we have and what is the pricing that we can have there. And once we have a few ideas about what they're probably likely to pay, what we basically need, right? So as a company to kind of get along, and then we can make an offer and we can say, maybe if you're in B2B, you can just try that out in your sales process. Maybe you can craft different packages. So one is like 1,000, the other one is 2,000, and the other one is 3,000. Then you have different values within them. And that's how you could test within your sales calls. What is the values that the people like and in your negotiations? And what is the usual package that people go for? So that would be one option where you can actively do that. On the other hand, maybe let's go to B2C. We have a few more people we can test. Are people going to pay $100 for this or $150? And if we A/B test this, for example, everyone that chooses $150, we can give them a discount for $50, and then everyone just pays the same price, right? And they're going to be happy about it. And that's also then how we can test, how willing are they to pay for that amount that we want. And I mean, obviously, if you go into B2B, then also at the start, you can make like certain deals. So, you give us like a lot of feedback. We meet every week and we can use maybe your logo or something like that. And that's why we give you a certain discount. That also depends on if you have money in the bank and if you can afford that or not. But it can be a really valuable way to really get in a few first beta test customers and really keep them like super close just by contract, because you gave them like a discount to make sure you get that feedback rolling in, and that you always like know when like whatever they do in the product and how they do it, so that you're really close to that, and then you can use these learnings to then further increase the value of your product, and then that allows you to increase the price.
Or you could just, flat out ask, how much would you pay for it? I would, I'd definitely answer that question. If let's say I'm usually, I'm editing videos, so I'm using some plugin tools so I'd pretty much, if they ask me, how much would you pay for this, I would give them an answer, straight out answer. I would actually, just check out, all the other tools, what they're priced, but I wouldn't have a problem with that. Okay, so we went through the 6 steps, which are pretty much directed towards, let's say, startups that are starting fresh. But there are also startups that are not sure if they have, fully made a product market fit. So how can you help them in this situation?
Yes, good question. So if you're already an established company and you have like a certain amount of traction already, or you have a certain amount of customers, so things are running, right? You have like 1 to 2 people per department. Then you can look at 2 things if you want to evaluate your product market fit. So one of them, the quantitative way, is that you look at your retention curves if you already have them. And what you want to look for there is basically a hockey stick or a reverse hockey stick, which means that your retention curve, like at the start, it's at 100, and then after a while it flattens out and it doesn't go down to 0. So you want it to flatten out, because that means that however many people are in that flat part, it doesn't really matter. But that means that you have found an amount of people, a segment of people that keep and receive constant value from you. And so they stick with you. And that is a very good sign for product market fit. And the other way, which is more qualitatively, is John Ellis's product market fit survey. And there's also a great article about how Superhuman did that. I think it's a classic. Probably most people kind of know it, but just very few startups actually implement that survey because it's really helpful. And that survey has 4 questions. So the first one is, how disappointed would you be if the company that you work for, the product, if you could no longer use it? Then the second one is, like, what type of people do you think could profit from the company? And the third one is, what's the main benefit you get, and how can we improve our service, whatever it is, for you? And I really like that survey, because with the first question, like, how would you feel if you could no longer use it? You can segment people into very disappointed, somewhat disappointed, and not disappointed. And just by that question, you can see, okay, who answered very disappointed? Who are these people? So if you do that survey, it's always important to link that back to your CRM, or to have the email of the people, so you can look up what kind of people they are. So they are your customers, but who is it, right? Is it maybe C-level if you're in B2B? Or if you're in B2C, is it maybe mostly parents, mostly men, mostly women? Like, what are the demographics of people that would be very disappointed if they could no longer use your service? And that already helps you a ton, because that helps you to improve your personas. And then if it's around improving on your product market fit, you can go ahead and say, okay, what's the main benefit that you receive? And you can look at the answers for the people that are super disappointed or somewhat disappointed. That can inform your messaging. And then basically, how can we improve our product for you? There, only listen to the people that are very disappointed or somewhat disappointed. Because the theory is that people that would not be disappointed, they are so far from receiving value from you, that we are not really going to look at them, right? We only want to look at the right feedback and implement the right feedback for the right people, and not kind of go into another direction to make some people happy that are not close to getting value right now anyway. So with that question, we have basically, how can we improve our company for you? We already have feature requests of people that would be somewhat disappointed or very disappointed. And if I want to increase my product market fit, I listen to the feature requests of people that are somewhat disappointed, because I want to transform them into people that would be very disappointed. So that's a way on how you can get pretty good feedback, get an idea about your product market fit, and already make a plan on how to increase your product market fit, how to optimize your personas, how to optimize your messaging, because all of that stuff that these people say, you can use that in your messaging, for example.
Right. So it's actually it's a never-ending story. The product market fit. It's always you always have something to do. You always have to.
Exactly.
Yeah, you always have to revisit your feedback and everything else. Because things are not going to turn out good if you don't listen to feedback.
Yeah, and I mean, your company will inevitably change over the next years, maybe even month at the start when you're building stuff really quickly, and also the people. Maybe you look at this new persona. Maybe your persona just has changed in a certain way. That's also why we recommend really doing that survey, like maybe every quarter, maybe every half year, like whatever rhythm for you would make sense, until you receive like 30% of people saying that they would be very disappointed. I forgot to say that before, but like of all the people that submitted the survey, if 30% or more people say that they would be very disappointed, that's the indicator, or like the benchmark of all the people that have been doing that survey before, that you likely are having product market fit or moving into the right direction. And that's a really important thing to know. Because if it's not at 30% or not at all, then you need to start building out that value. And once you have that, you can go and explore a little more, right? You can maybe build the feature requests of the very disappointed users to kind of make them even more fans and also stay ahead of your competition. But that gives you then the wiggle room or the basis to then start scaling from that. And then you do the survey again and you see maybe while scaling, maybe we did some things very right or maybe very wrong. You want to keep an eye on that, and then build up on the insights that you get from them.
Yeah, because if you don't do that, they might move to your competitor. If they figured out, that they can have something or make something that you don't have, then they can steal your customers, and your retention rate's gonna go down. So yeah, that's something to look out for. Yeah. All right.
Especially if you have a product that is realistically not so easy to copy. Especially if you start a company, then maybe your business model or your technology or whatever it is, maybe it's quite easy to replicate if somebody's fast. So over time you will have then build partnerships or build a customer base or build the knowledge. That then makes it harder to copy, but especially at the start, you really want to be the first few years and until you're really solid, you really want to keep an eye on it, exactly like you say, because if somebody wants to, they just come in and they do a better job of delivering that value, listening to the customers, maybe just with a huge marketing budget because a big corporation decided to make a startup and copy a product because it would be good for them, then it's a huge advantage to really be looking out for the product market fit score. Yes.
I always remember, it's not a software, but Kodak, they make film cameras and films. They didn't, adapt to the markets. They didn't, when the digital cameras started coming on the markets, they didn't, think about that. They just got pushed out, which is, if they had, asked their customers, what is it that you would like next, from us? All people would probably count, like to, see my photos on a computer and not, just wait for the film to be developed and everything else. So I always remember that story. That's one of the most popular stories, how they didn't adapt to the markets. Okay, Tim, that's pretty much it from my side. Your closing thoughts regarding everything that we talked about today, just in a few sentences.
Yes. So to your listeners, I think product market fit is a concept that is like it was always there, but it's really popular and it's really important for your scaling because you want to have that foundation before you make all of the small problems you have now into very big problems when you scale. So have a little bit of patience maybe to build that trust and build these insights together with your customers. It takes longer. It's not as flashy to talk to customers all the time. And maybe you feel more productive like doing business things, but it's really worth it in the end.
Yeah, all right. So it's a never-ending story, as I said. You always have to. Per market fit is something that's always going to follow you. If you start a company, so it's never going to end. All right, then. Thank you very much for being a guest on our show, and good luck.
Thanks, man. Good luck to you too.
See ya.